Okay. Good afternoon. I hope that you're doing well as we head into the 6th week of the quarter. This week kind of marks like halfway point where we have 10 regular weeks of the quarter for the final exam windows. We're definitely moving along pretty quickly and covering a lot of ground. Before we get started on the new stuff for this week, I just want to give you a couple of reminders and updates related to the class. First of all, I mentioned that my goal was to get the graded and returned reflections by Friday. I unfortunately needed to wait on a couple remaining submissions that were turned in a little bit late. I like to return feedback once everybody's turned it in. So thankfully I got those last night. So I will be able to post your full grades and feedback later today. So sorry for the delay on that, but you should be able to now see that up. So that is coming. Second of all, remember that you have your next writing assignment, the small group assessment, where you're looking at your participation in the group activities in the class so far, coming up for this Sunday. I can still look at rough drafts or outlines. I've had a couple questions about the latest that I can receive those. If you send me a rough draft or outline by Friday at the latest, then I can turn around feedback to you. That is pretty shortly before the assignment is due. So if you turn it in before Friday, then I have more time to turn it around. You have more time to use it, but as kind of a last absolute cutoff point, you can turn it in. You, of course, do not need to turn in a rough draft or outline, but it's definitely helpful and it can be of use to you. And remember that I do have office hours Monday, Wednesday, Friday, including right after class, in case you want to go over any of those things in greater detail. And I've also gone ahead and added the extra credit activity for last week onto Canvas. So last Monday, I sent a Canvas announcement. As part of the Canvas announcement, I said that if you emailed me the word "great," that I would add 3 points of extra credit to reward folks who regularly check their email, right, respond to announcements. So that extra credit is now added. If you missed that, remember to continue to regularly check your email for updates related to the class, and there will be another extra credit that you can do that will come up later. I just wanted to reward folks who are continuing to follow along, check their email, and do all that stuff. So just a reminder to continue to do that. So this week, we're going to be transitioning from what it means to brainstorm and work together in groups into what it means to have meetings, right? And to effectively work as part of a group in the physical or remote settings in which our group members communicate with one another. So to get us started, I want us to do a prompt that'll be the part 1 of your attendance for this week that'll help us to start to think about these things. What I want you to do is to think about a small group you're a part of or have been a part of in the past. For instance, you could choose the small groups that you did for your reflection assignment. And I want you to think about this group as one that has had meetings, right? So maybe they have introductory meetings where people get to know each other and work together. Maybe they have strategy meetings where you're part of an extracurricular group that discusses the strategy or goals that you're working on. Maybe you're a part of a committee or group like ASEOU that does more formal structured meetings. You have regular practices and so on, but some type of meeting that your group does. And I want you to think about when meetings in your group have gone well, some of the ways that your group works well together in meetings. And then secondarily, situations in which meetings in your group have gone poorly. So for instance, if meetings felt like they went on too long or they didn't feel necessary. So I'll give you some time to brainstorm and to think about times that you participated in meetings with your group. Take a couple more minutes on this. Go ahead and wrap up the current thought or idea that you're working on. I'm going to ask everybody to take a moment to share with the class as a whole when meeting in a group has gone well and when a meeting in a group has gone poorly. I think it's a good way for us to hear from everybody and get some added perspective on this topic. So why don't we start by hearing from the folks on Zoom. So again, feel free to share a situation in which a group meeting went well and a situation where a group meeting did not go so well. JB, let's start with you.
All right. So I just took group I was part of in my reflection. And The things that went well in our group meetings is like when we all came up with the solutions for the whole program. And it also like we have a coordinator with us when we have our group meetings, so it's really helped us. I don't know about or I don't think we have a meeting that went poorly, so yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I'm glad to hear that, you know, your meetings went well, and, you know, that's okay. When they're well coordinated and managed, that can definitely be a big help. Isabella.
I chose my high school class. Again, we would have class meetings, and I only had 15 kids or 14 kids in my class. So usually when they went well, like we would have something we needed to figure out, like if we were going on a trip or like we needed to fundraise, like that, like when we had a set task we needed to do, or when our class president was there, like she would usually direct the meeting. Then we would have someone take notes, and then people would usually like give their input and ideas, and they would usually talk. But then when our meetings didn't go well, usually like there wasn't anything we really needed to figure out. Officers wouldn't be there, and then nobody else would ever really say anything or give any of their ideas. So yeah.
Sure. A lack of people that need to be there, right, or professional support can definitely be a big challenge in meetings going well, for sure. Brooke. Brooke, are you with us? Caleb?
Okay, so the small groups that I chose was my jiu-jitsu gym, and the closest we got to having actual meetings was we would discuss technique after practices sometimes. Usually those went well when we had people that had kind of different perspectives all in the same place trying to discuss one strategy. So if you had a judo coach, a wrestling guy, and a jiu-jitsu guy, that's usually when it went really well because there was different perspectives, I feel. I wouldn't really say that we ever had any of those meetings that went poorly. I would say some of them were definitely less efficient depending on who's there, but kind of more fun when they're less efficient. So I would say they still went well.
Sure. There's always that trade-off, right, between enjoying the group, enjoying each other's company, and being efficient, for sure. So that can definitely be a factor for us to consider as well. Olivia, how about you?
I found that my meetings have gone the best when we have someone leading the meeting and when we have a goal for our meetings. I found that they've gone poorly when people don't share what they think, or the meeting just doesn't really have a purpose, and like people aren't really locked into like what the goal of the meeting is.
Yeah, right. Having a purpose, having a goal, having a reason to do it is definitely a really important part for being able to work in groups effectively, for sure. Thanks for sharing. So why don't we start with the face-to-face folks, and let's start in the back. So why don't we start in the back and move up from there?
So one group I chose was my jam section of folks. So it's basically part of the 45th parallel, which is decide when we want to do it. Usually meetings go well when we sound pretty good, everybody's offering ideas on what to do, how to play this, tempo changes and stuff. But when the meetings that don't go well, we get snarky comments from our own bandmates, like saying, "Oh, play this like this, or play this like this," because we want to add like our own touch.
Sure.
Music. So it just gets back.
Yeah, when you have the almost like infighting or teasing happening, that can definitely make the morale and overall performance of the group a lot worse. Okay.
So I did a throws group on the track team, and I said that something went well. I mean, technically, our meetings are kind of every day with practice, and it goes well when we're all like efficient and like know what we're doing and go in order and everything like that. Start on time and everything, and then meetings that haven't gone well. Sometimes we got chewed out a couple times because they think we are not productive because we are laughing and having fun. And so that meetings like that really, I think, frustrate us because we all are doing our work. So like any meeting where we get in trouble for something we don't think we should be in trouble for does not go well.
Sure. It can be an awful experience when you feel individually blamed for like group members that other people were doing things wrong, you weren't, but you get implicated because of the group, for sure. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I did my track team, and I said for the good meetings, I think everyone's just focused on what they need to get done for the day. And if everyone's just in a good mood, so that you can have conversations and talk about how you're throwing and how you're doing in the practice.
Sure.
And then bad meetings, people can just be tired throughout the day, don't have much energy, and then that kind of leads to not being focused.
Yeah. Maintaining some of the physiological needs, like, getting good rest, feeling alert and ready to go can definitely be a challenge for groups. Let's move up to the second row here.
So I talked about my own 4-H group. Meetings go really well when the president takes charge of the group and kids are being paid attention to by their parents. Meetings go poorly when parents really get off topic and they think that they're no one else, so they kind of just take over the entire meeting and should discuss things afterwards.
Yeah, oftentimes in those kind of meetings, the parents can kind of be the worst, right? And also are often not self-aware of the role that they play in this. So thinking about sort of like roles and not derailing the group with the role that you have is really important.
My group was actually the same type of group, and meetings went well when there was something for us all to do, like when you're close to showing or like there that get something to get done. And then meetings through like the winter months seemed unnecessary, very long, and there's
yeah, long meetings that are pointless can be the worst kind of meetings. For sure. Yeah.
I chose my high school soccer team. Meetings the most often efficient, like leadership meetings, captain meetings, whatnot, so people show up on time and with like the mindset to be productive with the meeting. Sometimes like there's important issues to talk about or that kind of stuff. And when people goof off and derail the whole like purpose of the meeting, it just makes it all pointless and takes even longer. So
yeah, that derailing, getting off topic and unfocused is definitely a challenge.
Yeah, so I chose my high school science club, and the meetings went well when they're like, it was somewhat organized. We had like a topic to go over, and we would like go through all the points of that topic, and like, people would bring in ideas, and like, we would make sure we thoroughly go through the topic and understand everything. And it went poorly when they were just like unnecessary meetings and like pointless and useless, like information that could have been summed up in like 2 minutes, even through like email or something, and it takes like 10 minutes to explain. You just sit there like, why are we here? Yeah, I was waiting for that. Could have been an email line. It's a rather infamous example, right, of the challenges that can come up in meetings. Yeah, the end of the soccer room.
The track team, I guess an idea of a good practice when they're all gearing up, each other up and encouraging each other. Practice is good now. Like mainly just miscommunication beforehand. Kind of practice can be times get thrown out a lot, so just kind of makes it.
Yeah. Again, poorly managed time, things going over time or cutting into your time is awful and creates this feedback loop of not engaging because time's up, you should be able to be done, but also feeling continued to be stuck in that meeting because it's still happening. And April.
So for the small group, I chose my job, and the meetings usually go well when we are able to come up with like goals as well as action plans. And it's always effective when
we're able to come to a conclusion on how we're going to approach a certain situation. And sometimes when these meetings go poorly is when they're on Zoom, because connection wise and like communication, and it's really hard to like manage when you should speak up next.
Sure. Yeah, it can be awkward, right, on Zoom if there's a bunch of people and you're not quite sure who's going to speak when, and who should unmute and all of that stuff. But yeah, as you bring up, there's some really good situations where you're able to work together and have an action plan, as you mentioned, that lets the group work.
I said an old volunteer group I was a part of, and I felt like it went well when we had a very linear meeting where it was just, what did we do good, what do we need to improve, and then what should we focus on next time? And then it felt poor when we just got distracted or off topic.
Yeah, that can definitely be a big problem, right? Of feeling like your group is not able to focus at this daily task. So I think there's a couple other folks on Zoom that I'm going to check in on. Lily.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, a small group I wanted to talk about was when a meeting gone well was probably like the RA. We have like a mandatory meeting like bi-weekly for like the huge staff, and something that like gone well was probably like everyone's like collaborating to like the bigger discussion, and everyone's just like going off other people's ideas. And something that has like when they've gone poorly is like when they've gone like way too long, like because these are like 2-hour meetings, and it's just like sometimes it's just like a whole lot of nothing that they're talking about. So like we actually had like a suggestion where they could like shorten the meetings and have a strict agenda, and which they did. So now our meetings are only like an hour.
Oh, that story warms my heart. That's good news to hear that it was made a lot more efficient. Thanks for sharing. Is there anybody? I think I got everybody on Zoom. Is there anybody that I missed? Okay. So I really appreciate you all taking the time to share your examples of groups that you've been a part of, because first of all, it's really cool to hear some of the groups and membership that you've had. I think though, it's really interesting as you all listen to each other to take note of some of the common trends and themes that we had about group meetings, right? A lot of folks, like Angela brought up, that group meetings work really well when it feels like there's a clear plan. There's a clear set of things that the group members are supposed to do and are supposed to accomplish, right? As Lily brought in, there's also really good situations where a group can be stripped back and more efficient and work through things much more quickly. So when groups can work together and get stuff done, and really feel like, hey, we got some good momentum here. We accomplished more than we would have on our own. That can be great. In fact, there are situations, right, where sometimes working in a group is faster than something like an email chain. We're able to get more done over that period of time. So there's definitely a whole lot that we can gain out of working in groups, but right, as folks like JP brought up, a lot of situations where a work meeting could have been an email, or we find ourselves scheduled to do meetings where nothing happens, and there's no plan, or there aren't, as folks like Kenna brought up, the resources that we need in order to have the group work effectively, or the group meeting just goes on and on and on, well past the time that it's supposed to. So I think those are all really important things to put into perspective, right? Whether you're participating in a group, you have the ability to make the group run more effectively or more efficiently, or as you'll inevitably find in your life, if you haven't done so already, where you're hosting and putting together a group. Maybe you're a team leader or supervisor, or you find yourself tasked with a leadership position, and you have to put up some type of group meeting, right? In those situations, I think it's important for us to think about those skills too. So building off of that, we're going to talk a little bit about how group meetings can go well and some of the challenges of group meetings. But before I do, just as a quick recap, we spent some time last week talking about this idea of problem solving and brainstorming the ways that when we're part of a group, we can facilitate and create a good discussion in which people come together, right? Last week, we did the birthday party planning activity, where I asked you to think about some of the ways that you could plan out a birthday party. And I really liked the thoughts and perspectives that you all brought to the table. I thought it was a really good example of how brainstorming can happen in group meetings. Also, as a reminder, your small group reflection, which is your next writing assignment, is due by the end of the day on Sunday. Again, if you send me a draft or outline by Friday, I can give you some feedback on that ahead of time. And again, I'm asking you to think about your participation in some of the group activities that you've done in class so far, and to apply the things we've been talking about so far in the quarter to that. We talked last week about this idea of group facilitation, that a facilitator in a group is not somebody that's playing their hand or showing their opinion necessarily, but is instead creating a space in which members of a group can work together effectively. If a group leader is domineering, right, and says, this is my opinion, this is what we should do, it can risk group members not fully sharing their own ideas because instead they want to conform to the leader, right? We talked about some of the ways that an effective group involves knowing the group's members and the challenges that they face, right? We're humans, we get tired, we need to go to the bathroom, we need to eat, we need to do all of those things. We're going to deal with disruptions, like if you're coaching a high school team, you're going to deal with those types of challenges. And it's important for us to think about, you know, capitalizing on the strengths and areas of expertise that people in a group have. So this class, again, we're going to talk a little bit more about group meetings, what it means to have a good group meeting, and what some of those challenges are in doing group meetings effectively. The problem with group meetings, right, one of the biggest problems, as JP brought up, right, is this kind of running meme and running joke of meetings that we have, whether they're happening face-to-face or happening through something like Zoom or Google Hangouts, feeling incredibly unnecessary. That meeting could have been an email. There are even coffee mugs that say, in a meeting that could have been an email, and you can like sip it to passive aggressively show people your coffee mug as you're in a meeting, right? And that's a really common frustration that we can encounter when we're participating in groups. And I want to unpack a little bit about why we feel that way, why we oftentimes have this frustrating, kind of antagonistic relationship with group meetings, right? There's a few different reasons. I think the biggest one is the idea that a group meeting is an opportunity cost. Earlier in the quarter, we talked about the idea of cost-benefit analysis. You want to go visit a friend or family member for the weekend. You have to weigh the cost, like the cost of transportation and time, versus the benefit, getting to see that person, and then make a decision about whether or not to visit them, right? We're making that type of determination all the time. So when we find ourselves stuck in a 2-hour meeting in which nothing happens and people go on and there doesn't seem to be much of a point or topic, we get frustrated because we could be doing all sorts of other things. We could be, you know, going out for a walk, getting food, doing whatever we want, right? The fact that a group meeting is an opportunity cost, that we waste the time and energy and resources attending that meeting instead of other things, I think is the biggest thing that we feel against us today. Overall, the benefit is small, the cost to our time and energy is very large, so a meeting does not feel worth it. Another idea, and this is something that I think a few folks brought up as they were going around and sharing their own experience with meetings, is that meetings can be facilitated really poorly. Sometimes you have crucial people that should be at the meeting, but they're not. You might have opportunities for socialization, which can be good, right? But also a meeting can get too off task or too unfocused. Or you have members of the group who just, again, talk for hours and hours and really derail the conversation. So when a group's not facilitated well, it takes too long, things don't get done. And again, another idea here is that the content of the meeting, the things that really needed to be done, could be easily accomplished in a different way, right? Particularly if they could be accomplished asynchronously. So for instance, right, I need everybody's opinion on this topic. Could be something somebody could send out as an email. You could get people who could reply and do so asynchronously and make sure that the person could respond to the email on their own time. In general, email is not nearly as much of an opportunity cost because people can choose to respond to an email when they're able to do so. And there's a lot more flexibility in completing that. And people tend to go through emails like in batches together, right? You see a bunch of stuff in your inbox and you work through it. So when we feel like there's another way to do the task instead of a meeting, that can be a big source of frustration too. So given those frustrations, again, given that kind of running gag about a meeting that should be an email, there's a few ways that we could think about what meetings should look like and how to do meetings. Meetings, right, are not an end in themselves. That is, when you're a part of a group, the goal of that group is never to have a meeting. That's like the most awful bureaucratic sounding thing ever, right? The goal of your group is to win a game or be really successful or to learn about math or science or build a really cool robot, right? You have a goal or task that your group is supposed to do. So meetings are never the end, they're a means to an end. Group meetings are a way to get there. We should always think about meetings as such. There might be opportunities to do more casual meetings like socialization and all of that stuff, but you might think about dedicating a specific space or situation in which the goal of the meeting is to socialize, or making it clear to members of the group that this is meant to be kind of a casual socialization experience. So meetings are a way that people can meet their goals. And there's two specific ways that meetings can help you to reach your goals, whether you're participating or you're creating your own group, right? One of them is making a decision. Sometimes you need to make a decision as a group on an issue, and it doesn't make sense to do so through email. If you're a part of a group that's trying to hire somebody for a job and you're trying to decide who to hire, oftentimes an email can be a better way to do it if people aren't able to meet, right? But email only goes so far, especially if people have to reply, you have to wait a long time for people to reply and so on. Whereas if you make a decision in a meeting itself, you hear everybody's perspective, they get to share their point of view, you could cast a vote together, right? You can make a vote, you could use something like consensus, you could arrive at a compromise and make a decision, as we talked about last week, in a way that you otherwise couldn't do, right? And then the other thing that we gain through a group meeting is this idea of synergy. So group meetings work well whenever your group has a particular challenge or task that they need to work through together. For instance, if you're part of a group and you're trying to brainstorm or figure out how to host a birthday party, right? You all did that and you came up with a lot of ideas that I don't think you would have been able to come up with if you were just working alone. You were able to generate a lot of ideas really quickly and bring in a lot of points of view from every person in the group that made that experience go really well. The synergy, this idea that people are more than the sum of their parts when they work together and they can do more than they can do independently, is another big reason that you would have groups. If groups don't help those two things, they're probably not necessary for meetings. So consider the benefits, again, of doing a meeting compared to alternatives. So consider, for instance, why are we meeting? What are the things we're trying to get out of this meeting compared to what else might be available? So participating in meetings, right, is a two-way street. So what it means is that if you're a leader of a group, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot you can do to make your meetings run well. But as a member or participant in a group, like a club or team or activity, right, there's a lot you can do to improve your own experience and at least on your end, make that process of participating in a group work better. First of all, let people know as soon as possible if you can't attend. There is nothing worse than having somebody like run into a meeting late, be all like sweaty and out of breath and say, sorry, I got here late. Oftentimes that derails the conversation or topic and makes it harder for the group to work together or focus, right? It's a big distraction. Whereas if you're in a meeting and you email and let them know ahead of time or text or call, and you say as a facilitator, hey, I talked to Thomas, he's running a bit late and he'll join us soon, much less distracting. And now everybody is mentally prepared to know that Thomas is going to come in late. Prepare if you are meeting, right? So preparation means a lot of things. It means ensuring that you're able to get there on time. It means maybe mentally preparing or thinking through what it is you're going to be talking about. And as we'll discuss in a moment, it might also involve putting together something like an agenda. An agenda can be a huge, huge help when you're in a group and trying to work together. Paying attention during a meeting, obviously it's a good idea to listen and to focus and to pay attention for many different reasons. But one of the biggest reasons that you should pay attention during a meeting is to avoid repetition. There is a very good chance that somebody will say something or offer insight in a meeting. It's awesome, but you didn't hear them, and so you basically said what was already said earlier. That can be incredibly repetitive and frustrating if people are just repeating the same thing over and over because they didn't hear or follow the flow of the conversation. Or somebody goes out to lunch and then they come back and they don't realize that they've shifted to a different topic, and you move backwards by circling back to an older topic. Being clear and concise. So remember, when you're in a group, the time that you speak and participate is a much smaller piece of the pie, right? When you're talking one-on-one, it's like 50%. When you're in a group of 10, you're only talking for a small fraction. As a result, you should prepare what you're going to say a little bit more. Maybe take some notes. And also, one easy way to do it is to just be brief if you agree or you share something. What does your conversation point or idea add that isn't already in the discussion? Doesn't add anything new or add anything useful? Save it. Wait to express your views until you hear from others, right? So again, if you're going around and sharing your thoughts or perspectives on an issue, to wait and to listen and to be responsive to what other people are saying is really important. Challenging your assumptions. So as I mentioned before, having somebody who plays devil's advocate can actually be really useful in small groups because it means that there's an opposing perspective that can strengthen the group if it's heard and talked about, right? By taking on a different point of view and saying, I don't know why we need to have this meeting hybrid, let's just do it face-to-face, right? You let the group members really talk it out. And also to know when to give in, right? So if you are a stick in the mud the whole time, and you say it's my way or the highway, I'm not listening and so on, right? There comes a point, especially if you're doing something like a vote, where you've got to get something. One example, it's a pretty classic case of small group communication, is the stage play is adapted into a famous movie called 12 Angry Men. You might be familiar with it, but it is 12 jurors who are trying to figure out if somebody is guilty or not guilty of a murder. And what ends up happening over the course of the film and play is that everybody goes from thinking that this person is guilty, and then they realize that as they go through the evidence, no, this person isn't guilty. But there's one obnoxious character who's the holdout the whole time. And this juror continues to insist that the defendant is guilty. But eventually, at the end, when everybody is incredibly exhausted and worn out, he gives in and says, okay, not guilty. Not because he believes it, but again, because he's willing to give in and to listen to the group, kind of mercifully end things. So know when to do that. You might think about a strategic concession as, look, I'll give on this, but I do really want us to talk about this other topic or issue. So sometimes conceding a point can help you to gain more favor or support on another topic. When it comes to holding or hosting a meeting, again, if you haven't done so already, you will likely need to do so very soon. The biggest thing is goals, right? There needs to be a purpose behind the meeting that you're doing. In fact, if you can't identify a purpose or goal and say you're doing like a group that has a weekly meeting, I can guarantee you members of the group will be incredibly happy and relieved if you say, look, we don't really have anything new on the agenda. Let's skip this week's meeting. Your group members will be incredibly happy. Don't feel like we need to do a meeting just because it's on the calendar, right? People will absolutely love it when you cancel because you give them time to do other things. Figure out who needs to go. So sometimes people get invited to meetings and they have nothing to do with the meeting, or they have little to add. Sometimes we think we want to be inclusive and say, hey, you can participate in the meeting. But the challenge is that if we don't really give people the chance to decline or to explain the purpose of the meeting, you get people who are stuck in meetings who don't want to be there and don't feel like they have. An agenda is incredibly useful. So an agenda is a written document that explains the purpose and goals of the meeting. One of the best ways, if you're ever hosting a group or you're suggesting to a group host that you can handle this, that we do in our college, is maybe a week or two before a meeting, ask everybody in the group to email agenda items. That is, have group members email the things that people in the group are supposed to bring to the table. And then a couple days before the meeting, send out the agenda to everybody so that they can review it and know what's going to be talked about within the meeting itself, right? Ask people what they want on the agenda. That way you prevent people from bringing in random topics once the meeting starts. You have a clear direction for what is going to happen in the meeting. And then send out the agenda so that everybody knows what is going to be discussed. They have a chance to review it, and they have a chance to have a more informed perspective. I can guarantee you your groups will go at least like twice as more efficiently if you do the agenda. Make sure everybody gets the agenda, of course, send it out to everybody. If you're hosting and putting together a meeting, arrive early, especially true so that you can solve and deal with tech issues. There's nothing worse than a meeting starting like 15 minutes late because the person hosting the meeting doesn't have the cord to get the monitor set up and has to get a tech person to come and help out, right? Already derails the meeting from the beginning. And don't stretch things out if you can finish a meeting early. Again, I guarantee you, people will be very happy if the meeting ends early. In fact, meeting ending early can be a carrot. You can say, hey, if we can get through this, we have 3 big things to get through. If we can get through this, we can get out of here early, right? And that can be really useful, again, to incentivize people. But you want to avoid preventing it from having people rush through, because if you don't give enough time, you're not going to have enough quality work or discussion within the group. So definitely give the right amount of time for participation. There's kind of a curve, right, where the closer and closer you get to a deadline, the more decisions get made and the more things happen because we procrastinate, feel the crunch toward the end. So having that set time can really help to accomplish the task. So here's what I want us to do now as the part 2 of the attendance in the remaining few minutes that we have. So you're part of a group that is hosting a nationally famous motivational speaker who's coming to EOU. You and your group members are going to hold a meeting to discuss how to prepare for that person and how to host that person on campus, right? There's probably a lot of things that you need to cover in that meeting. How are you going to handle transportation? Are they driving? Are they going to be picked up from the Boise airport? Like, what's going on there? How are we going to handle lodging and food? So there's a lot of different things you probably need to figure out, right? What I want you to do is to imagine and write down an agenda of, if your group members are holding a meeting to host this person, what would you want to make sure is discussed in the agenda? So try drafting that agenda together. And as you're doing so, think through what needs to happen for this group to have an effective meeting. So I'll give you some time to work on and think about what this agenda could look like. Give you another minute or so. You need to work through this. Go ahead and wrap up the current thought or idea that you're working on. And this is just an opportunity for us to get our feet wet and to start thinking about how you can use agendas and planning to help make your meetings go better. Wrap up for today. We've talked about how group meetings, right, are not our favorite, but understandably so. They can go well when people really feel like they're connecting with one another. Or vibing, I guess you could say. And they require good preparation and guidelines, and using things like agenda, planning, and so on can help group members work together effectively. For next class, we'll discuss facilitation in meetings and some additional ways to make our meetings go better. So please email or pass forward attendance for today. Have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you again on Wednesday.